This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. And you know what? All we talked about for the last 3 months as it relates to baseball was the lockout. And it was all bad news, and we didn't think we'd have baseball. Heck, just a couple of months ago, or just about a month ago, when I had Emery Songer on the podcast, I was predicting that baseball was not going to come back until May. And here we are, Thursday of this week, April 7th, we've got opening day. We've got a full 162-game season, and baseball is here. I know a lot of us are jaded out there, but I love opening day, and I'm excited for this season. So to kick off the baseball season, as we do every year with this podcast, we're talking baseball this week. My brother Neil and I, Neil's coming back on. He's got a kid due any day now, and he's coming on the podcast. We're calling this Moonlight Baseball Hour. We're talking about the things we are most excited for this baseball season. So grab your peanuts, grab your Cracker Jacks. You know what? Grab a hot dog and a cold beer too, and saddle up for 40 minutes of Neil and I talking baseball. As always, thanks to our sponsors here on the Moonlight Graham Show, the People's Company. We could not do it without the best farmland guys in the business, Andrew Zelmer, Matt Adams. Thank you for your support. You guys are the best. Enjoy opening day and enjoy Moonlight Baseball Hour, and have a great week, Moonlighters. But before we get to our interview, Moonlighters, are you or someone you know moving down to Kansas City? Well, if you are, the one realtor that we trust and yet you need to be calling is the great Brian Sandvig. As you well know, Brian Sandvig is our producer here on the podcast, and there is not a better residential real estate advisor down in the Kansas City marketplace than Brian Sandvig. Call Brian Sandvig, shoot him a text. Hey, DM us on social media. We'll get you connected with Brian if you can't find him on all the socials, but he is there and he is active, and he is your Kansas City realtor, so give him a call. Brother Neil, we are just days away from your second child being born. How's the Flattery home in Fort Dodge doing with baby Flattery on the way?
Everything's going good around here. We're just kind of waiting, and it's all we can do at this point is wait. I don't know. Our first baby took a week after the due date to come, so I'm thinking a similar thing may happen with this one.
More anticipation for opening day or for the baby?
Probably the baby. We gotta get the baby here first, and then we can kind of think about opening day a little bit more.
I feel like if a pregnant woman goes past the due date, it's kind of like a lockout.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all negotiations. Labor.
That's a good way to put it. I had never thought about that before. It's like MLB had to go through some labor negotiations, and we're going through the same thing right now.
Yeah. What's Brooke think about us making her labor seem extremely trivial?
I think she'll think it's really funny.
Yeah, of course she will. So, Neil, everybody's been talking about the lockout over the past couple of months with baseball. It's really clouded this offseason and spring training. What are your thoughts post-lockout here as it relates to baseball?
Well, I'm just kind of following it on social media and those sort of things. I kind of just getting tired of it, of just kind of the back and forth between the players and the owners and the people getting upset about it on social media. I didn't know who to believe. I didn't really care about supporting one side versus the other and that sort of thing. And I'm just really glad to see it all over with and not really affecting the season all that much. And I'm hoping we just don't really have to worry about it till the next labor negotiations come up in however many years that is.
I'm of the opinion right now, and I tried to be optimistic over the entire offseason, even during the lockout, and ultimately a deal was done. I think there was a lot of bad PR for baseball, but a deal got made, and it looks like we're going to get all 162 games in this season. And I don't think people are going to be talking about this lockout 2 years from now. I really don't. I think it's something that's in the rearview mirror for baseball, as long as we can have a fun and exciting baseball season this year, because as long as we get 162 games in, I think we're okay. The fans should be happy. The players are getting all their money. The owners are going to be getting all their revenue. And hopefully, last postseason was so much fun, so exciting for baseball. It was a great year of baseball last year in 2021. If we replicate that again in 2022 for Major League Baseball, I think the lockout is going to be a thing of the past. I don't think it's going to have long-term implications, but maybe I'm in the minority there.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think the crowd that we follow on social media, is more tuned into it than maybe a lot of common baseball fans are. And most people are going to be tuning in once the games start in April. And it's not going to matter that, for a couple months during the winter that, we're in a lockout, so to speak. So, I mean, I really think it could have been terrible if we had another baseball season, the third year in a row, that wasn't a normal season. But luckily that didn't happen. And so I think everything's going to move forward just like you had said. Yeah. And everything's going to be fine.
So a couple of things that came out of the lockout that I think might be worth touching on here is some of the changes, the rule changes coming into the game. Not all of these are going to come into effect this year, but some are on the table for next season or the season after. When they push rules out that way, you never really know if they're actually going to end up on the major league diamond. They test them out in AAA typically first. Some make it to the major leagues, some don't. But here's a list of changes, Neil. Let me know what sticks out to you out of this. First of all, the universal DH, and it looks like that might be here to stay. So it's a universal DH with one Shohei Ohtani exception, that if you're the starting pitcher, you can stay in the game after you get taken out of as a pitcher in as a DH, which I thought was an interesting caveat, which only would be there if Shohei Ohtani was in the league. Like if this came into play 5 years ago, there would not be that caveat within the rule. Next one is postseason expanded to 12 leagues. The man on second base. So people are calling it the ghost runner. I know it's not the ghost runner, but people are calling it the ghost runner rule in extra innings. They expanded the rosters from 26 to 28 teams. Pitchers can remain in the batting order, or we already said that, the Ohtani exception to the DH rule. And then we got pitch clocks, bigger bases, and a banning of the shift coming into AAA this season, with maybe coming into the major leagues in 2023. Out of those, what sticks out to you, if anything?
I was really hoping that the quote unquote ghost runner rule was going to be removed this year. And I mean, I don't want to get into this, just rant about how much I hate that rule, but it's one of those things where I tune in every game, every non-Twins game I watch, hoping it goes 40 innings. And the fact that, they just want to limit those games, it's not a problem. The problem isn't that there's every once in a while, there's a game that goes 20 innings. The problem is that a 9-inning game is going 4.5 hours. And so, I mean, people are well aware of that argument. It's all over social media and that sort of thing. So I don't really want to touch on that too much. It just makes me sad more than anything else. I'm done being mad about it. I'm just kind of sad at this point. Other than that, I think it's interesting that the Shohei Ohtani rule, that, I mean, I like the way the status quo of the DH rule, but it doesn't really bother me to expand it to both leagues because I followed American League Baseball for the most part anyways, so expanding it to the National League is not going to affect my viewing all that much, although I did like having that kind of quirk in the National League rules. But it is kind of telling that Shohei Ohtani has this kind of weight in the game right now where they're making rules based on him specifically too. And I'm interested to see kind of how, he impacts baseball players coming up now, to see if more players are going to try to do the dual role type of thing that he's doing too, to see if that kind of affects how players are coming up too. So what do you think, Tim? Which one stood out to you?
None. Well, first of all, the bases one was interesting. That was something that I just never had thought about. And so you look back in the history of the game and I'm like, well, when's the last time they changed the size of the bases? Because I had never once thought about even the bases having a universal size. Like, I assume that they did, but I've never even heard it mentioned. Right. And so I think the bases actually became a foot all the way around in 1887. So it's been, what is that, 135 years since they last changed the size of the bases, which I thought was interesting. If that can create more stolen bases and more action in the game, I'm actually all for it. I've got no problem with them adding a few inches on each side for that. But I also don't know if it's necessary. Like, if we're just making the bases bigger and it doesn't change the game at all, doesn't add more stolen bases, then it's kind of dumb. One thing that I missed that I actually kind of liked was the 7-inning doubleheaders. I would rather they had the 7-inning back-to-back doubleheaders than the quote unquote ghost runner rule in the ninth or in the 10th. I thought more doubleheaders was good for baseball. And I thought that was interesting last year when they were doing that. And I'm actually going to miss that because I like doubleheaders.
Yeah, I didn't mind the 7-inning doubleheaders too. I kind of enjoyed that, kind of getting those quick games through too. So, yeah, I agree with you there. In the bigger bases, I don't have a problem with it either. But yeah, like you said, if it doesn't change the game in a positive way, then I don't see any use for it.
Yeah, the 7-inning doubleheaders, the best part about those is in the last 20, 30 years, when baseball had a doubleheader, it'd be a day-night doubleheader. So you'd get like a 12:05 pitch start followed by a 7:05 pitch start with a 3-hour gap in between the games. The 7-inning doubleheaders, they just played them back-to-back with like a 30-minute break in between. So as a baseball fan, if you're just parked on the couch all day, it was great. You could essentially go get lunch between games, come back, and you got first pitch of the next game. Plus, the 7-inning games are really exciting because you're bringing the bullpen in like the 4th inning, and you just had more action in the games because one run meant a lot more in a 7-inning game than a 9-inning game. And so I liked kind of the change of pace that you saw. That was one of the reasons why I enjoyed college baseball a lot, because you play a lot of 7-inning doubleheaders, and those games had different strategy to them than the 9-inning game. And so I like the mix of both because you got to see a different strategy come into the game of baseball.
Yeah, and it kind of brought us back to how they're kind of used to handle doubleheaders way back in the day, where it'd just be back one game and the next game happened right after it. Whereas like the way doubleheaders used to be before last year, it was just like you said, like a 4-hour break in between. It wasn't really like a traditional doubleheader anyways.
Yeah, and you'd see some guys like they would change their pants but not change their jersey, or vice versa. And so they'd be dirty from the game before. And I kind of love that. Like I like some of that throwback stuff, because they were just eating a sandwich or taking swings between games and they just kept the uniform the same. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
So coming into this baseball season, Neil, anything that stuck out to you in the off season post lockout? One of the things that I really liked was, for the first time that I can remember, maybe since like A-Rod went to the Yankees, the baseball offseason was exciting. And this was one of the byproducts of the lockout, was we had to cram in an offseason of baseball from free agent signing into about a 2-week period. So there was this flurry of activity that the baseball offseason hasn't seen in a long time, and it more closely replicated like the NBA offseason, which of course is really exciting. And so you saw all of this free agency activity happen in a 14-day period, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to mention something similar. I mean, even the couple weeks before the lockout happened, it was kind of the same sort of deal where there was kind of a rush to get people signed before the lockout happened too. So you saw a lot of deals there, and it kind of condensed everything in a way that made it kind of fun to follow too. So yeah, that's something I kind of noticed too. And, and I think to some extent it was good just having baseball be on the news, for better or for worse. It was kind of nice to have some exposure. And, the fact that, as we had discussed earlier, that I don't think it's going to have a negative effect on the game going forward. I do think baseball needs to figure out a way to, keep marketing their players and that sort of thing. And there are a lot of issues that they have to solve going forward, but I don't think the lockout's going to be one of those, luckily. So it did give us kind of a little bit more exposure than we maybe would have normally had in a normal off season.
I'm going to go through a list of free agent signings in the offseason here. You tell me if any of these struck your radar. So we had Trevor Story to the Red Sox, Castellanos to the Phillies, Schwarber to the Phillies, Kenley Jansen went from the Dodgers to the Braves, Matt Olson from the A's to the Braves, Freddie Freeman to the Dodgers, Kershaw to the Dodgers, Chris Bryant to the Rockies, Rizzo to the Yankees, stayed with the Yankees essentially, Matt Chapman, that was kind of surprising, third baseman, went from the A's to the Blue Jays, Greinke's back with the Royals, Chris Bassett from the A's to the Mets, the A's just totally unloaded on everybody, Josh Donaldson to the Yankees from the Twins. Twins picked up Gio Urshela, Sonny Gray, Carlos Correa, obviously the big pickup by the Minnesota Twins. And then maybe my favorite under the radar transaction was Seiya Suzuki from Japan to the Cubs. And I always love a good Japanese import, especially when it's coming to a major market like Chicago. So Neil, out of that list, what makes you excited about this season?
Well, one of the ones I was kind of excited to see was just the fact that the Rockies went in on Chris Bryant too, and because they were one of those teams last year that struggled, and they let Nolan Arenado go a couple of years ago, and so it's kind of like, the Rockies really in this to win, or are they trying to dump salary and that sort of thing. So it's kind of nice to see kind of a mid-level team like the Rockies go in big on a big free agent like that, and take him away from, I don't know who else would have. I mean, the Yankees probably would have needed a third baseman. I don't know who else would have needed him, but it was kind of nice to see that. That was kind of a breath of fresh air to see kind of, a smaller market team get one of those big free agents. Other than that, I mean, obviously the Japanese player going to the Cubs too, which is kind of exciting to see. But well, what about you? What else stood out to you?
Well, the one I didn't mention was Scherzer to the Mets. So Scherzer to the Mets was a big one. But I guess what stood out to me was two of them. Albert Pujols signing with the Cardinals, and then Greinke going back to the Royals. I think it's cool when players that have been in a league a long time go back to the place where they started their career. So I really like those two signings. The other part of it is there's all this emphasis being placed on the Dodgers in their lineup right now, which I think is great for baseball. I think it's awesome when we have a big market team like LA that has a great team and they continue to invest in it. But the Braves are the defending champs here, right? And the Braves signed Matt Olson, picked up Kenley Jansen. They're going to get Acuna back. I think the Braves are going to be every bit as good this year as they were last year, but everybody's talking about the Dodgers. Like the Braves are already kind of an also-ran, even though they're still the team to beat.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's fun too where we're at now. You have a team like the Dodgers who have kind of taken the reins of they've taken the Yankees spot in terms of being the team that's going to go out and get the free agents and build the unbeatable lineup and pick up all the big free agents and that sort of thing too. And I think it's a really strong point for baseball that the two biggest cities in the country, New York and LA, it's almost like, I mean, in LA especially, it's like baseball, the MLB team is maybe the best show in town, besides maybe the Lakers, I guess. But they don't have an NFL team that they're really, following all that closely. Although the Rams did just win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But they just came there the last couple of years. And then the Yankees, I mean, the Knicks haven't been good for a while. So it's kind of a strong point for baseball that the two biggest cities in the country, baseball might be the team that they're following most closely. I know that's kind of on a different thread.
We're going to wait to talk about the Yankees till later, but isn't it interesting that the Yankees, their biggest pickup this offseason was Josh Donaldson, who's essentially, damaged goods coming from the Twins. Like the Twins couldn't wait to get rid of him, and they would have essentially paid a portion of his salary to get rid of him. And instead, the Twins fleeced the Yankees by picking up Gio Urshela and flipping another guy to them in a deal that they unloaded salary, they unloaded Donaldson, and it turned out to be a great bargain for the Twins, and they could flip that into Carlos Correa too. It's weird seeing the Yankees get worked in free agency, get passed up by free agents, and not really being the biggest part of the conversation in a baseball offseason.
Yeah, it's really confusing. I mean, it kind of just makes you think, what are they trying to do right now, and why don't they have the money at their disposal to make these big moves like they maybe used to 10, 15 years ago under, old George Steinbrenner? It's kind of a head scratcher more than anything else.
Yeah, was Big George, was he more of a risk taker than his sons? Are his sons more business savvy, more business minded, but ultimately don't have the risk tolerance that George did, which led to winning? And I was talking about this earlier with you, but it was weird at the Field of Dreams game, which you and I were at, of course. And we're in the outfield. We see Hal Steinbrenner walk right by me. I have a picture of Hal Steinbrenner 5 feet from me. And I don't think you would have ever seen George Steinbrenner do that. Now, for better or worse, right? Like, it's weird seeing Hal Steinbrenner being a man of the people, where it felt like the old school Yankees, they were above that a little bit. Now, they might have been pretentious, might have been snobby, might have been upper crust, nose in their air. But like old George would have pulled a Donald Trump and flown in on a helicopter before first pitch, and he would have made it all about him kind of thing, where Hal is just a man of the people. And it seemed like the Yankees were better off when they felt like they were above the game or at the peak of the spear of the game. And it doesn't really feel like that anymore. To your point, now it feels like the Dodgers are there. It feels like the Red Sox are there. And maybe those are the two premier franchises, with the Cubs being right behind them, Cubs and Yankees.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. It's almost like, the Yankees haven't won a World Series since 2009. Since then, the Red Sox have won 2. The Dodgers have won how many? 1? Just one though.
1.
And it's almost like the fact that the Red Sox now have kind of taken the spot as like the team to beat in the NL East, it's almost like it's broken the Yankees. And they're just like, well, we used to have this thing, and now we're not the top dog anymore, and we're just going to roll over and let these other teams take our throne. It's kind of sad to see almost.
And the Cardinals too. You forget about the Cardinals, but the Cardinals are kind of viewed in that old school way that they're doing it right, and they've got a really good thing going in St. Louis there as well.
Yeah, but it almost seems when the Cardinals win a World Series, and not that they don't have good teams when they win a World Series, but it's almost like it's a surprise when the Cardinals win. They're not always the team. They don't always come into the postseason with 105 wins and just roll through the postseason. Seems like they have to have like a scrappy performance from David Freese or someone to get them over the top. But no, I see what you're saying though.
Yeah, the Cardinals do feel, you're right, they're more regional. The Braves might be a better example. The Braves are more national than the Cardinals are, even though the Cardinals seem to be more entrenched in St. Louis than the Braves are in Atlanta, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, because I think the Braves are kind of like the South's team. For a while, they were the only team in the South, and the Cardinals to some extent too, but the Cardinals aren't as big of a market nowadays than they used to be back in the day, although, they still draw 45,000 to a game, which is good. But
the Cardinals need like a return of the St. Louis hip hop scene. Like, it hasn't really been the same since Nelly was rolling, and he had the St. Lunatics going. Whereas like the Atlanta hip hop scene is thriving, right? You got the Atlanta show on FX. Who's our guy? Donald Glover's down there, and he's making Atlanta like the big thing. And I feel like the Atlanta hip hop scene has been really popping for the last 25 years. And it seems like the St. Louis hip hop scene needs to come back around.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that.
So Neil, what other storylines are you looking at this year? What are your like top storylines heading into baseball season?
Well, we had kind of touched on this earlier, but yeah, one of the things, just kind of the Yankees' continued struggles. But one of the things you had kind of mentioned before was just kind of like the Shohei Ohtani show. It's kind of what we had saw last year, and to see if that can kind of continue to this year. And I hope I'm not stealing from your list, but
no, this is good.
This is good. But, it's just a guy we just haven't seen do what he's doing since basically Babe Ruth. And it's just the fact that we're able to throw out those comparisons to some guy who was, Babe Ruth is almost more myth than reality to a lot of us, now. And it's like to see a guy who's doing the same things that Babe Ruth was doing 100 years ago is really cool to see. And so I'm hoping to see if that can continue this year.
What would be great for baseball is if the Angels were good, to have two good teams in LA, and the underdog of those two teams has Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, the best player in baseball, would be so awesome. Like, you have Clayton Kershaw, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman playing for the Dodgers, and then you have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani just south down in Anaheim there. Like, we forget that Mike Trout's still the best player in baseball right? And he had such a disappointing injury season last year. And for those two guys to both be healthy this season, I think is the thing to watch. And I think they like each other, and I think they're both good guys. So that's what I'm watching. Is, to your point, the Ohtani storyline is remarkable. And sports are often copycat leagues, and I hope we see copycats of Shohei Ohtani. Not everybody's going to be able to do it, but I'd like to see more of that diversity. And I don't mean like by race or gender. What I mean by diversity is guys trying to break the molds of the boxes that kind of modern baseball has placed guys in. And it seems like Japanese baseball is the best place for that because they do things differently there, and they have different levels of success for that. We saw it with Hideo Nomo. We've seen it with Ohtani here, and the Japanese influence on American baseball is a good thing. And I'd argue, American baseball needs to copy more of what they're doing over in Asia.
Yeah, I agree completely over there with everything you said, Tim. And I think, the way the Asian baseball game has made it an entertainment, spectacle for the sport. Like it just seems like going to a game in South Korea or Japan or Taiwan is just kind of like the place to go. Whereas here it's more, I do like how we do it here. And I've heard Japanese baseball players say that before, where, in Japan, they may have like structured cheers and that sort of thing, which is fun. But over here, everything is a little more natural with how everything's going about it. But I think having a good mix of both and having their brand of baseball mixed with our brand of baseball can only produce good results. But back to the Angels, Tim, I think what baseball really needs is for the Angels to be good this year. I think that's been disappointing the last few years, even before Ohtani, came onto the scene. The fact that Mike Trout was on the Angels and they were a 500 team or worse wasn't good for the game. And I like that. Like, you can't just throw Mike Trout on a team and make them a playoff team, but it does hurt having, a generational talent like Mike Trout and now Shohei Ohtani on a team that's not making the playoffs and not as many eyeballs are seeing it.
You're right. Like, you want the best players in baseball to have a big enough impact that they can single-handedly impact the team. And that's one of the downsides of baseball is in a game, because it takes more than just one guy. And we see that with the New York Mets and DeGrom, right? He's been the best pitcher in baseball, and they've stunk. So it would be good if the Angels are good. That's good for baseball. My next point then is leading into DeGrom and Scherzer. What I love about them pairing up as dual aces for the Mets is Mets have this history of supporting their aces. When Dwight Gooden was pitching in the 80s, New York stopped when Gooden was on the mound in Shea Stadium. When Matt Harvey had that 2-year run for the Mets not too long ago, and he was Batman or the Dark Knight or whatever his nickname was, New York stopped, and you knew when he was on the mound. Now, with DeGrom and now with Scherzer, maybe the two most exciting pitchers in the game to be number one and number two in that Mets rotation, I think it's awesome to have that in New York City, in the Big Apple, and especially pairing them up with Steve Cohen, the new exciting owner for the Mets. Whatever you might think of him, I think he's ruffling a lot of feathers, for better or for worse. So having those two guys on the same team is going to be awesome. And I hope they can, raise the tide there for the Mets.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's going to be a fun rotation to watch. And I think it's going to be fun to see kind of how Steve Cohen, comes into the scene and makes his presence known in the New York market, with the Yankees kind of being down these last few years, to see if he can kind of, spend some money and change some things in that on the Mets team. That'll be interesting to see. So one other thing I look forward to every opening day is, a lot of people talk about, like, with their team, there's just this like boundless hope that you have on opening day that like this season can be, the one. But I also think on like a MLB wide level, one thing I like, paying attention to when the season starts is just like, can any guy make a run at like the home run the single season home run record? Can any guy make a run at 400 or anything like that? And I think baseball could really use like a Giancarlo Stanton make a run at 73 home runs or something like that to like de-steroid the home run record too. I think that could be really good for the game, or have someone make a run at, one of those records that is so that we haven't really paid much attention to the last few years for whatever reason. So I think that's something fun to follow too.
We haven't had a good hitting streak in a while.
Yeah.
We need somebody to get over 30 games as a hitting streak, because to your point, it's fun when every now and again you see a guy make a run at a record that you previously didn't even know about. Like I remember when Eric Gagne, the closer, was setting the record for most consecutive saves without blowing a save in a row. And I didn't even know that was a record. But then all of a sudden it became exciting to see when Gagne came in to see if he wasn't going to blow it. Same thing. Like I hope we have, like a hitting streak or a home run chase, something like that. Or maybe it's DeGrom, going out there and just throwing up 35 consecutive scoreless innings, something like that to follow. That makes some random Tuesday night game appointment viewing.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, where I think one of the problems that baseball's ran into, and I've kind of seen it happen to my own baseball fandom to some extent, where we're only paying attention to our own team. And that's one of those things too, though, where like when I see a big hitting streak going on, I am tuning in, whether on StatCast or on MLB TV. Every single time that guy comes up to bat, I'm paying attention because I have to see if he gets a hit, or I have to see if he gets a home run to, get him closer to those records too. So I think that'd be one way to kind of bring the game to a national stage that's kind of been lacking these last few years.
One thing that I'd be curious about is Trevor Bauer right now. So a couple of off seasons ago, was it last off season? Trevor Bauer going to the Dodgers was some of the biggest news in the sport. And Trevor Bauer was really making a name for himself because a lot of people loved what he was doing on social media. He looks at pitching in a different way. He just has a lot of opinions. So a lot of people hated him. Some people liked him. A lot of people hated him. And then all of a sudden he has this bizarre story that happens in the middle of last season that involves like rough sex with somebody he had an agreement with. And it's just the most bizarre thing you've ever heard of. And especially like post Me Too movement, post Deshaun Watson stuff. Like there's just so much going on here with this. He's got lawsuits, defamation lawsuits against The Athletic out there right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how like the Trevor Bauer stuff plays out, because he is a lightning rod for opinions. And if he ever sets foot on a mound ever again, I think he's going to be one of those guys where if your team's facing Trevor Bauer, you as a fan are going to be booing that guy for 7 innings. And that's, for better or worse, I think it's going to create interest in the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of forgot about Trevor Bauer. Like he was one of those guys where it was always fun when the Twins were facing him. I like the time where I don't think it was against the Twins, where he chucked the ball over the center field fence. Like that was one of those things where it's just like, just awesome. And I just love the fact that happened.
That was like a top 10 moment of the whole season.
Yeah, that was so great. I want more stuff like that to happen. More
or how
brawls.
about you forget that like Kepler hit 3 straight home runs off Bauer, and it was like 5 home runs and 6 at bats off Bauer at that point for him. And then Bauer would go to Twitter and like start making fun of himself with it and start engaging with people as they were roasting him. And that was awesome. Like that was so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I kind of, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out this year.
Like it's similar to the Deshaun Watson situation a little bit, but Deshaun Watson is not the character, and it was not as visible as Bauer was. Like videos. I mean, Bauer was doing like daily vlogs on YouTube that had a huge baseball following, and I would argue was actually really good for the game. And then this weird sex thing pops up, and it's just really, really, really bizarre and kind of scary, honestly. Because I don't want to pass judgment because I think he was doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, I haven't followed the whole legal situation all that closely. So yeah, it's kind of a shame because he was kind of doing a really good job marketing himself, which was good to see. But yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Other storyline that I've actually been talking about this for 3 years now, and I should have been talking about it for 5 years now. But Albert Pujols still being on a major league roster, and I know he's one of the greats of all time, but it's ridiculous. This guy is 44 years old right now. I know it only says he's 42, but if you poll Major League Baseball front office executives in an anonymous polling, I guarantee you're going to get over 90% of them that say he's 44 or 45 years old. And if you look at his stats, they make a lot more sense when you add 2 years to his age every time. It's kind of ridiculous that he's still on a roster. Now, granted, if he wants to do the Udonis Haslem thing where he's like a coach on the team that can still hit a home run every now and again against a left-handed starting pitcher, I get that. They've expanded rosters from 26 to 28. Part of that allows guys like Albert Pujols to be on the team, and that's fine. But he has been a below average player. He's got a negative WAR since 2017. He stinks. Like he stunk in 2017, he stunk in 2018, he stunk in 2019, he stunk in 2020, he stunk in 2021, and he's still got a job getting paid over $22 million in 2022. It's incredible. I mean, he's one of the slowest guys literally on the planet. I don't know if there's a professional athlete in any sport that's slower than Albert Pujols. Like if you saw him run the 40-yard dash right now, I bet he would be the slowest guy at the NBA or the NFL combine, like by a mile. Nobody's even coming close.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I did think it was really cool seeing him come out at spring training as a Cardinal. And, you know, that's one of those things that baseball does really well is when an old player comes back or, you know, the honoring and doing like the standing ovation and the walkout from the left field fence or right field fence and that sort of thing. That was really cool to see. And I hope that he does make a run at that 700 home runs too, because that would be fun to watch too.
I don't disagree. And I'm not anti Albert Pujols. I just think that it's kind of insane that he's still got his numbers are atrocious, like so bad in every category.
And they've been bad. I'm looking at his baseball reference right now. They've been terrible since
2017.
Yeah. 2016, he was okay. Yeah. Yeah. He was terrible in 2017.
And during that time, he's made over like $100 million being a below average player in the major leagues. Not like below average Albert Pujols, like being worse than Nick Punto.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an understatement almost.
So anyway, storyline to watch.
Yeah, that'd be fun to follow. I mean, he looks like he's 45 at this point.
Final thing that I want to talk about, Neil, what else you got?
No, the only other thing I had was just, and I'm not really looking forward to it. It's just a storyline. It's just kind of the continued tanking of these smaller market teams that aren't spending, but I'm not really looking forward to it. I'm just kind of interested to see how it plays out. Which does baseball decide to do something if some of these teams are just refusing to field a competitive roster and spend money to build a competitive baseball team? I'm not sure there's a great answer for it, but it's just one of those storylines to follow.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't become the story of baseball is the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Baltimore Orioles. And, you know, there's a list of about a handful of these teams that currently have a payroll under $100 million, which is absolutely crazy. I hope that those teams are making investments to the product on the field and not abandoning their fans, because it's just so short-sighted and their lack of awareness is concerning. And I hope that doesn't become a long-term storyline here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Last thing go ahead.
Yeah.
Neil.
What else you got, Tim? That's what I was going to ask.
Well, my last thing is we got to talk about Buxton and the Twins.
That's right. Yep. We have been avoiding it.
So Buxton signs a $100 million contract, long-term deal with the Twins, which frankly is a great deal for the Twins but also could be a potentially great deal for him if he performs like he's capable of and stays healthy. He could make a bunch more money in incentives in this deal. He's really betting on himself. He wanted to be in Minnesota. I think that's super positive. And so, to your point about being excited, being the idiot fan that has this irrational joy before opening day, that's where I'm at right now. Not because I think the Twins are going to win the World Series, but the thought of Carlos Correa at shortstop, Byron Buxton in center field has got me really, especially with being strong up the middle. We got Polanco, who's one of the best second basemen in the game. He was not one of the best shortstops in the game, but we got Polanco at second, Correa at short, Buxton in center. Talk about being strong up the middle. That's strong up the middle.
Yeah, I know. And it just gives me so much hope too, to see the Twins finally be a destination for some of these free agents. And then also, lock down some of these good young talent out for long-term deals too. Like, it's just one thing we've just never seen the Twins do, on a consistent basis while we've been following the Twins for the last however many years. I'm just so excited. I don't know what else to say. I mean, having a top 5 level player and actually having 2 of them, if Buxton can play a full year, he is a legitimate MVP type of guy. He missed, I don't know how many months he missed last year, but he still put up 4.5 WAR last year in a season where he was hurt for 2 or 3 months.
Buxton was healthy last year. He was the Byron Buxton of our dreams.
I know, his numbers are unbelievable too. And, pairing that with Correa too, where it's just his contract too is one of those two. It's just kind of a home run deal for the Twins. I mean, if he, essentially it's just kind of a 1-year deal where if he does really well, he could opt out and go sign for the Yankees for $1 billion. But if he did play it out, the full 3-year deal with the Twins, it'd just be a home run for the Twins. I mean, in every sense of the word, because it's not like, we're paying him for his very prime seasons. He's only 28 or 29. And so we're paying him for his best seasons too. And having him, pairing him with Buxton, if we can maybe find some pitching too, to supplement that too. But, I still have hope that, you got Joe Ryan, and he seems like he's pretty, he might be pretty a reliable starter too. And do we still have Maeda? Kente Maeda?
Yeah.
He was bad. He was bad last year, but the year before he was a Cy Young type of guy. So maybe he'll have a bounce back season too. You kind of never know with the pitching too. There could be a couple of these guys come up from the farm system too and kind of make an impact too. So I'm not losing hope that we couldn't still have a solid rotation too when it's all said and done.
All right. Well, that's our first Moonlight Baseball Hour, Neil.
Nice. How do you think it went?
I'm still recording.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, that was fun. So.
And as you're following this baseball season, make sure to look up the Moonlighters that are out there playing in the major leagues and the minor leagues, especially, Caleb Thielbar with the Twins, great Moonlighter. Tony Watson, he's going to be on a contending team this fall. I guarantee it. Tony Watson from Grimes, of course. Think about Daniel Tillo, Sioux City guy who's in AAA with the Royals. Maybe he'll make his big league appearance this year. So follow the Moonlighters this season. Have a great week. And special thanks to the Moonlight Graham Show team, Brendan Gargano on the artwork, Brian Sandvig, our back-end producer, my brothers Andy and Neil, and of course, Tommy Griffin, who does the best write-ups and is the best co-host in the business. Enjoy opening day. Have a great week, Moonlighters.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.